here, and I'm excited to have a few extra minutes because it is quite a challenge to tell you what Catholic Charities does in a matter of 20 minutes or so. So I will do my very best. I'll talk fast, but I do want to tell you that this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what Catholic Charities does. I was retired and came here to Sonoma County, and sometime you want to have coffee, I'll tell you the long story, but suffice it to say I was not looking to go back to work, but I was tapped to join Catholic Charities, and I said, well, only part-time and only for a year or two. And about 3 weeks into it, my husband said, it's absolutely fine with me, whatever you want to do. I just want you to realize that you're there about 6 days a week. And that was 9 years ago this past Sunday. So I love the work. I love the agency. I was very thoughtful in deciding if I was going to go back to work. I wanted to go with someone not just to help out, but to actually make a difference, and they are making a difference. So if there's one thing you can do for me today, if you hear anyone complain about homelessness, tell them we've tried complaining for a very long time, and complaining hasn't worked. So we need to do something else, and I really do believe that Catholic Charities has figured out how to do something else. You wanted to hear about Caritas Center, so hardly anybody can pronounce it except for the Latin scholars, but Caritas, driving a car, loosely translated means love for all, love for all. We provide emergency services, we provide long-term services, and we do not turn anybody down. So that's really important. We cover a wide geographic area, and we try to stay in our lane. So we don't try to be expert in everything. I will try to click and talk at the same time. How about I just nod to you when we want to go to the next?
Right.
You can just go. It's just pictures. I don't really rely on it. But they're right there. We can find no social or moral justification for lack of housing. Housing is the answer to the crisis of homelessness. If we were in a different environment, a different housing environment, our work would be very, very different. It's a matter of finding housing and matching it with the person. So what we did probably 3 or 4 years ago, we got smart and we said, you know, maybe social workers aren't the best people to find housing. Why don't we employ realtors who are familiar with the low end of the market? So when someone's experiencing homelessness, it's not homogenous, okay? So let me back up a little bit and say that there is quite a diversity among people who are homeless. In my own naivete 9 years ago, I pictured a man. I pictured him living on the street. I pictured him in a hooded sweatshirt. I pictured him with his head down. Okay, how many have that kind of an image in their head for homelessness? Let me tell you, the people that you see down on 4th Street that match that image, that's about 10% of the population. So many people come to me and say, how many people are addicted? How many people are coming to you with some kind of an addiction problem? Because that's what we see. That's the visible homeless. What you don't see is the mother living in her car with a 2-year-old in the back seat because she's escaped domestic violence. She ran out of the house with clothes on her back, grabbed the child, grabbed the car keys, and took off. So I just want to go back and remind you that I said what we're seeing, the visible homeless, is about 10% of the population. So that means that we have to address those populations differently, right? It's not one size fits all. And anybody who has more than one child knows you raise them differently, you coach them differently, you do things differently. And maybe that's not a great analogy, but we have a diverse population in homelessness. So we have people who are living on the street that we know they're going to get back on their feet. They just are, and that's the majority. So rather than focusing our resources on the people who are going to get back to a stable housing situation, we're focusing on the people that nobody else wants to deal with. And if you're familiar with the Pareto principle, it applies here too. 20% of the homeless population consumes 80% of the community resources. So I'm sure all of you have a soft heart, but even if you had a stone cold heart, you would want to support the work that we're doing because it's very costly to have someone on the street. Someone on the street calls 911. They use the ambulance. They go to the ER. The ER is the most expensive bed in Sonoma County. And if you keep cycling through those resources, you can run up quite a bill. So economically, you should support the work that we're doing. So going back again to just kind of give you an overview, Caritas Center, which I invite you to come and visit, because you'll see pictures here. You can move ahead, Neil, a little bit. You'll see some pictures here of Caritas Center. It was a very bold project. We were told that this community wasn't big enough to support a project like this, but we felt like we could go forward. You keep going until we get to a picture. Go to a picture of the. There we go. So that's good. So this is what we were dealing with before. We had remarkable results out of what people call the old hospital downtown. It was not built for the work we were doing. And that's a look at one of the rooms there. And then this was the drop-in center. It's a 2-bedroom decrepit house that all the people who are experiencing homelessness who needed to come for dignity services came there. Does that look like a place you could go for dignity services? How do you walk in there and get your hopes up and move forward? So that was the before, and we said, can't we fix that up and save a little money? And we were told it's kind of like an old car. You keep putting money into it, but it's an old car. So that was working, but we knew we could do better. So we built Caritas Center. Move forward. You keep going until you get to a building. Keep going. All right, go ahead. Perfect, right there. So that's downtown. This is Caritas Center. That's Caritas Homes, and the whole thing is Caritas Village. That is not all of Catholic Charities. That is the resource for people who are still living on the street, coming in for services, and that is shelter for people experiencing homelessness who have children 18 and under in tow. We allow women in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy to come in for housing because if they don't have an address when they go to the hospital, Child Protective Services will come in. So this gives them an address. So that is, I want to repeat, that is for families in shelter. Down on the way into Sebastopol off of Wright Road, we have a shelter for single individuals that's almost 200 beds. Again, addressing the populations in different ways. A family needs different services than an individual does. Families have rooms of their own. The individuals, in order to get more people into shelter, we have a big communal space. It's called Sam Jones Hall. And so this is to get families back on their feet. And it's working quite well. People come there and there's a plan to stay fewer than 180 days. So when you come into this shelter, you're assigned a housing locator, a housing stabilizer, and a housing navigator, and you don't need to remember that. But there are people who will assess what your needs are, and they're trained to do that. All the while, a housing locator, who again, back there, someone with real estate experience, is looking for housing for you, and then a housing stabilizer. What's it going to take for you to stay in that home? So if you go down to Caritas Center in the morning, right now we have about 90 children in shelter. You'll see school buses lined up because we want children going to school where they've been going to school. So they're going in all different directions. Everything that's going to make their time more successful. So we know that children in shelter are more likely to be obese as adults because they know what food deprivation is, right? So they will hoard food as they get older, right? They're almost 100% sure to have some kind of social adjustment issues, right? Because these children are at a time in their life when they want to bring friends home. The kids don't want to bring friends here, nor really can they other than outside. So I want to emphasize that the children are there through no fault of their own. They feel the stress. If anybody has a dog, you know that in your home, if someone raises their voice or there's some tension going on, the dog knows it, right? Have you seen dogs react to stress? And if you think that a dog has that perception and a child doesn't, that doesn't make any sense. The children know their families are under stress, and they're feeling that stress. And I saw a Christmas card. The kids were making Christmas cards for their parents. And one little boy, he couldn't even really write everything out. He was trying to sound it out. He drew a little rectangle with a little triangle on top and some squirrely something coming out. So the child's rendition of drawing a house. And he was making the card for his friend. And inside he said, "I hope Santa Claus brings you home." Now, what little child should be thinking that way, right? They should be talking about, bringing you a dump truck or a soccer ball or something like that. But that child knew what his friend needed. His friend needed a home. So the children we give quite a few services for the children, including tutoring. They know they're different. If they're going to school and they start to fail, it just reinforces their own thoughts about themselves, about being different and not being worthy. So we do tutoring. We try to expose the children to things like art and music and culture and just things that have them thinking beyond where they are. And they want the same things. We've all been teenagers. We know that time of life can be really challenging. And there was a young man who was in shelter, and he came to one of the case managers one day, and he said, "The worst thing has happened." She said, "What?" He said, "This girl I like asked me to go to the prom." She said, "What's wrong with that?" He said, "How can I go to the prom? She wants her dad to pick me up. I can't have her dad come here and know that I live here." So the case manager said, "Well, we'll think of something. You tell her that you can go." So they decided that they would meet at Mary's Pizza. The case manager would drive the boy and his mother. They'd go in, meet, do the handoff, and the case manager wouldn't be in the scene. "Okay, great. What am I going to wear?" "Well, we're going to get you a used tuxedo." "Fine, all is good." So they had the whole plan. Now, can you imagine? There's men in this room. You know the stress of prom, right? As a teenager, it's not easy. So the young man wakes up in the morning, the day of the prom, and the case manager came and said, "Aren't you excited?" He said, "I can't believe it. We forgot to get a garage." And you need a garage if you're going to go to the prom, right? So I just tell you that story to tell you that there's so much that needs to be done, right, to get somebody stabilized and get them on the path. And not only do the children in shelter have the same desires as the children that we know, but their parents do too. The parents want the best for them. So Catholic Charities is there helping liaison with the schools to know if the child's falling behind. That we're doing assessments for the children to see if they are falling behind, but we're also working with the families to say, what will it take? And let's get you into housing. And it's not necessarily the next house that becomes available, it's the apartment that's going to work for you. Maybe where you're working, where you have, somebody that you know, some neighborhood that you're familiar with. And we also provide landlord incentives. You can imagine a lot of landlords do not want to house some of our population, but it's very low risk because we work with the families to help them know how to be good tenants. We do provide landlord incentives. We have landlords who call us, quite often don't even advertise the next place available, and they call and say, we're going to have a one bedroom, on May 1st. Do you have a family that wants to move in? So I am oversimplifying the work that needs to be done to help someone get ready for housing. But that's a big part of the work. And our goal with Caritas Center is to reduce the time in shelter. Time in shelter is stressful, it's expensive, it's difficult, it's an emergency situation. So not only have we been successful getting people into housing, we've been successful keeping them there. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help someone get ready for housing. One of my favorites is anyone who's been without a home. They're traveling around usually with very few belongings, but everybody has a picture of a family member in their pocket, right? Maybe two, maybe three. So when the housing navigator goes to that home to get that apartment ready, if they have picture frames that they can get the pictures out of that person's pocket, put it in the picture frame, and hang it on the wall, that person is 3 times more likely to stay in that home. So little things like that. Also, one of our secret sauces is we have someone available for a year if they want to counsel them, to encourage them, to check in with them, to tell them how to open a bank account. How many have kids who moved out of the house? Older kids. Did they ever call you and ask you a question about their apartment, about their taxes, about their car? Anybody? Did you ever get a phone call? My daughter moved and her apartment wasn't ready. I went with her and she called and she said, Mom, she moved in to the apartment. She said, Mom, get Dad on the phone. I said, what's the matter? She said, everybody's telling me if I don't turn on the gas, I'm going to have a cold shower in the morning. That sounds awful. I don't know how to turn on the gas. I said, honey, I don't need to get Dad. All you need to do is call the gas company, right? But we're not born knowing that. We all coach our children all the time. My kid said, Mom, you're always teaching. I said, well, there's a lot to know, right? So our people are providing that wraparound services for the people moving into housing. And we have, anybody who's done statistics knows statistics, you can make them do whatever you want to make them do. But on average, nationally, about 30% of the people who are experiencing homelessness move into housing, they're falling back out within a year. Out of the family shelter, we're at over 90% of the people have stayed in housing a year out. I mean, that is remarkable. So, suffice it to say that we know what we're doing there. It's a difficult thing to think about. It's not something that I really thought about, but about 5 years ago, Forbes magazine had an article that said the average American does not have $400 set aside for an emergency. Do you remember reading that? I found it shocking. Someone gets a flat tire where they're on the verge of, a budget catastrophe. They get a flat tire, they miss a day of work. Now they're 20% down, right, for that week, plus they've got to pay for the flat tire. So Catholic Charities also has services. We estimate there are about 25,000 people In Sonoma County, 25,000 who are on the verge. They're one catastrophe away from falling into homelessness. If you fall into homelessness, it's expensive to get back into housing. The rent's probably gone up. You have to pay security deposit. You have to pay first month's rent. Some places you have to pay last month's rent. That's a huge hurdle to get back in. So why don't we keep people in housing? So we have a group within Catholic Charities that does nothing but try to keep people into housing, doing budgeting, connecting them with resources, showing them how to do nutritious food on a budget, taxes, how to do the earned income tax credit, all those things to keep people in housing. Maybe the place you're renting is bigger than what you need. Maybe you need to downsize. So all those things, and again, I'm simplifying the work that's being done, but when you feel that there are tens of thousands of people who could fall out of housing, that's a really frightening number. So I want to leave time for questions, but I also want to mention that we are doing difficult work. It's not always linear. You will hear stories of not success, right? And I just want to give credit, because if I become impatient with you in your homelessness, or I am not giving you the compassion that you deserve, if I remind you how many times you've failed since I've known you, that's not a path to success. So the people who are doing this work are absolutely angels. They're trained angels. It is an organization of professionals. We're all challenged with keeping current on our area of expertise. We have accountants, we have social service workers, we have data people. We are data driven. We are constantly measuring what we do. We're constantly trying new things. We constantly have our ear to the ground of what are other people doing and what's worked, and we know that this is working. So the next time you hear someone complain about homelessness, please remind them complaining hasn't done anything. Look into an organization like Catholic Charities who knows what needs to be done. And I do also want to point out the Palms Inn. I'm sure you've read a lot about the Palms Inn. The Palms Inn is permanent housing for people who have been determined to not have the capacity, the physical well-being, the mental well-being to be able to get back on their feet in their own home. So they're provided permanent housing at the Palms Inn, and they're provided ongoing counseling and community activities. I was out there St. Patrick's Day serving corned beef to the crowd, and you have probably heard that many people have died at the Palms Inn. Well, the reason they've died at the Palms Inn is because we didn't want them to die in the street. They had been out with illnesses, with whatever, and they came to the Palms Inn to have a place to die with dignity, to have someone with them, to know that someone cared about them, to be clean, to be fed, to be nourished both in the body and spirit. So yes, there have been deaths at the Palms Inn, but that's the reason why. We're taking care of people that nobody else wants to take care of. So I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, I'd like to ask, what is your budget for the year, and how many people do you serve? And maybe you can kind of elaborate on that.
Sure. So my husband's in the tech environment, so remember with startups, everybody knows how many employees they are. They'd say, I was employee number 23 or whatever. Well, I was employee number 67 at Catholic Charities, and everybody's like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know, it was just a Silicon Valley thing. I counted how many people were here, and I was number 67. Now there's over 200 people. The need has expanded. When I came on board, we'd kind of go out in the hallway and say, hey, what do y'all think? This is what I'm going to do. But one of my jobs was to kind of put some processes in place and have a strategic plan for the work that we do, which now is really robust. So now we have over 200 employees, about a $20 million a year budget. The next question will probably be, where does that money come from? So we do get funds from state, local, from HUD, and the national focus, the federal focus is on, you've probably heard the term housing first. The focus is on permanent stable housing. A lot of what we're providing is that emergency service. So to go straight from the street into housing isn't always the path. There's often a path in shelter. And that is something that we're not shining the light on right now. The government isn't, but we do get a lot of support from those three entities, and they're in the form of grants. If anybody's worked with grants, they're wonderful. We could not do the work without them, but they're very specific in terms of what you can do and who you can provide that for. So the difference that allows us to do the work the way we want to do, giving people the time they need, giving them the dignity, giving them that little extra that's going to stabilize them, that comes from personal giving and personal sacrifice. And without that, we would not have the success that we have right now. So there's kind of like the base of grants, and then there's the layer that allows us to do the work the way we do it. Is that?
And how many people do you serve a year?
That's an excellent question. Giving a round figure, I'd say about 10,000 unduplicated, right? But someone comes in, we're one of the largest immigration service providers in the country. And people go, ho-hum. And I say, we're one of the largest immigration service providers in California. And they say, really? We're both. So people may come in to attend a citizenship class, and they it becomes apparent that they're hungry. We connect them with resources. So it's one person, but getting, two services. So unduplicated, probably about 10,000. Yes?
I have some experience in developing affordable housing. Having been the director of the Alaska Public Housing Authority. And one thing that my wife and I have been surprised about, with all these apartments mushrooming up around town, the very small number of them that are so-called affordable. Have Catholic Charities had any input to, get the city to realize these numbers are inadequate?
Definitely input. So I had a funny story. I was meeting someone down in front of the center, and I was inside, and she didn't come in the lobby, never late. And I thought, why isn't she in here? She's never late. She hasn't texted me. And I went outside, and she was sitting in her car, and I said, is everything okay? She said, oh, I wanted to wait till things calmed down. She said, I saw the sheriff's car here and 3 police vehicles. And I said, don't worry, it's for their semi-monthly meeting. It's all safe to come in. So we are talking to city council, to any elected, all the time. Our CEO was just in Sacramento yesterday for the afternoon talking about opportunities. So we all love Sonoma County. We love it because of the greenery and the open space, and dense housing is a difficult sell. There aren't many high-rises here. But as you said, there are affordable units being built, so what's happening with the population? And a lot of us are doubled up in housing. Many people my age have adult children living with them. And so when these affordable housing units become available, sometimes that just, people move out of their housing. So it isn't all going to people from the street or from shelter, right? It's very quickly absorbed. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we need dense housing. And this is Caritas Homes, and that's being built by Burbank Housing. And again, Catholic Charities, we try to stay in our lane. We try to do what we're good at. Burbank Housing is excellent at managing affordable housing units, and they are building, it's even progressed from there. Hopefully in July, they'll be opening 64 units, and then sometime soon, 64 more. So 128 units, 40% of phase 1 is reserved for our population at Catholic Charities. And I'm not sure that, well, I'm not sure, HUD hasn't really determined what the composition of the second one will be. But it's progress, right? Not enough.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The young mother who's living in her car with a 2-year-old with no job skills, how do you help her be employable?
Great question. So there are both. There's the mom who has skills, who shows up and you think, you know, she's perfectly fine, she has nice clothes on, she has been to school, but maybe she's escaped domestic violence or divorce and lost some of her income, or can't afford childcare, so has to wait till the child goes to school to go back to work. But then there are people who are potentially unemployable at a level that would be sustainable here in Sonoma County. So one thing we do have is called Transitional Residence Program, and it doesn't offer a lot of spaces, but it's a beautiful part of Caritas Center where people can live after they've come through services. They've done very, very well. They're really motivated to get back into the workforce, but they may not have references. They may not have a recent job history. So they apply to be in this transitional residence program. They work for us 20 hours a week, and in that traditional 40-hour work week, they are spending the other 20 hours going to school, looking for jobs, getting their paperwork in order, whether they, you know, their license, driver's license and social security card have been misplaced, whatever it is. But they typically work in our drop-in center because they have that lived experience and can work well with the population who comes there. And then that allows us to be a reference for them going forward. So that's one element. We do refer people for job training. We do have like parenting classes, things like that. Most people, if they're physically able, could find some kind of service work. Childcare is a huge issue, the cost of childcare. So we have partnered with Community Action Partnership, and we will for the first time have childcare on site, which will be, that will move families forward very quickly. Yes, sir.
What you're doing, is it duplicated in other places?
Oh, that is an excellent question. Thank you so much. I didn't even plan that. So when we were building Caritas Center, we looked around the country and we did not see anything with this level of wraparound services, you know, kind of beginning to end. We want to be a model for other communities. I haven't even told you everything that's in there. We have a clinic, we have a place called Nightingale. So when people are discharged from the hospital and they would normally go back on the street, very costly to their physical health, right? I mean, if you're discharged from the hospital, you're not going to do well on the street, so they bounce right back, right? So we have a recuperation center. It was 13 beds at the Brookwood Community Center, and the local hospitals begged us, literally begged us to expand that capacity. So we have 38 beds here at Caritas Center, that recuperation space. The 13 beds, they estimated, saved $8 million the first year in non-hospital costs. But to answer your question, We recently had a convening. If you want to be really cool, you don't have conferences or meetings anymore. You have convenings, just saying. So we had a convening and people came from all over the country, Alaska, DC, to learn how to do a Nightingale program. So we want to be a model. We've partnered with, of all places, had nothing to do with me, with Notre Dame, who has a program to learn what programs are working in the social issues, social justice environment. We've partnered with them to spread the word about what we've done. We have, if you ever get a chance to come down, I really truly invite you to come. You have to make an appointment, but come and see. It's trauma-informed architecture, high ceilings everywhere, lots of light, lots of windows, no sharp corners. Everyone who comes to us has had trauma. People who've had trauma are literally and figuratively afraid of what's around the corner, right? So let's make it a peaceful place for them. So that kind of thing can be modeled in other communities. So we are inviting anybody to come and learn about what we do. We have had people, come and learn about it because we've done the work. So let's share that and have other communities prosper.
Are you involved with any other low-income facilities like Bethlehem Towers?
Yes. Grab a quick drink. I've already told you more than I know, so I just need a little swig. We try to partner with everybody. And so some of the places, we'll refer people out to. And there is something in the county called coordinated entry. So any place where there is a shelter bed available, it's known there so that we don't have to kind of do that research ourselves. But also any low-income housing, it's in the inventory for our housing locators to know what's available. And we will partner with anybody, and we do partner with, you name an organization, and we're working with them. We have somebody, one of our employees at the Family Justice Center, the Boys and Girls Club, and anybody. We have what we call provider tours to share with anybody who's in this arena to come and learn what we do so that we know how to partner with them. I think it's time for one more, right? That's what you're going to tell me? Okay.
Catholic Charities has how many divisions, offices, chapters in the U.S.?
A good question. So every Catholic Charities in the United States, there's 78, I believe, or, oh boy, I'm not sure. It might be 178. I think it's 178. So there is an umbrella organization in DC that does a lot of lobbying, and they do a lot of work on social justice issues. That is an umbrella that we have access to their knowledge and their research, but we are an independent 501c3. We're not at all governed by them. There's no direct relationship. We make our own decisions about the services that we provide, completely separate financially. Our board of directors manages all the work that we do. So the other Catholic charities, I know there's one on Long Island that's just pure mental health services. They have psychiatrists, and that's what they do. For us, immigration is a big issue given the agriculture here, and homelessness, because of the cost of housing, a big issue. We're one of the oldest counties in the country, so we have senior services, and that is the population that's growing the fastest in homelessness, the seniors. So thanks for asking that question.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you very much. Don't go away. We have a little something for your time and effort you gave us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.